Hello, everyone. Welcome back to YCR's Food for Thought series. For those of you who are just seeing YCR for the first time, we're an advocacy group made by students and young professionals, for students and young professionals, who believe that Canada can have a strong future in resources, the economy, and the environment. Please connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. All of them are at YC Resources if you want to learn more about what we do. In addition, for this food for thought, please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A box below. My name is Justice. I am a graduate of the U of A business program, and I've been working with YCR for the past 2 years. And with me today are Lily and Camilla. So I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, so my name is Lily Peterson. So I attended SAIT until 2019. I took the journalism program. I've been with YCR for about a year, and I'm really excited to hear your presentation today.
Hi, my name is Camilla. I am from Quebec, and I studied environmental sciences at University of Sherbrooke. I joined YCR in December of last year, and I'm super excited to learn more about your subject today.
Awesome. So without further ado, I'll introduce our guest. So today we're joined by Mr. Dave Carey. Based in Ottawa, Dave joined the Canadian Canola Growers Association in January of 2020 as Vice President, Government and Industry Relations, where he leads the organization's lobbying efforts and spends his days engaging directly with federal policymakers, their staff, and industry partners. Prior to joining CCGA, Dave spent 8 years with the Canadian Seed Trade Association, including 3 years as its executive director. Dave currently is the treasurer and member of the executive board of directors for the Canadian Agri-Food Trade Alliance. And in 2021, Dave founded and co-chairs the Agriculture Carbon Alliance, a first of its kind coalition on 15 national farm groups focused on advocacy on agri-environmental policy issues, including the introduction and support of Bill C-234. Dave began his career on Parliament Hill as a senior political staffer for members of Parliament from Ontario and Alberta, and held senior roles on 3 election campaigns. Dave is an active member of the Government Relations Institute of Canada, where he serves as a government relations mentor and sits on the sponsor and advisory board of the Parliamentary Internship Program. Dave has been recognized by his peers for his excellence in government relations and has been included in the Hill Times Top 100 Lobbyists in 2021, 2022, and 2023. Dave, it's a pleasure to have you with us here today and looking forward to your presentation.
Oh, thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me today. Just give me 1 sec. I'll just switch over to Deck will walk you through, and we'll try to keep it to sort of 20-25 minutes, and then time for Q&A. So maybe just give me a thumbs up if it looks good on your end, and it'll roll. Okay, great. Well, yeah, thanks for having me here today. I do have some slides prepared just to keep my thoughts together, so I don't go too over time. Sort of 4 kind of areas, or 3 areas, and then Q&A I want to touch on, and and I will try whenever possible to sort of circle it back to things that this group has sort of looked at and discussed before, kind of the interconnectivity of our different sectors and industries. So first, just a little overview of my organization, Canola. The big issues impacting farmers. We are a farmer first organization. Our board is only farmers. Our mandate is only the interests of Canada's 43,000 canola farmers. And then a bit of a, I'd be remiss if I didn't speak to just kind of what some perspective, from what's happening in Ottawa, from my vantage point, representing farmers full time here in in Ottawa, just a block south of Parliament Hill. So yeah, this organization logo. There's a lot of organizations that operate in the canola space. Canola, I'll get to the economic impact. Canola is the largest agriculture commodity in Canada. It's a $29.9 billion a year industry. At the national level, there's us in the Canola Council of Canada. We actually cohabitate our Ottawa-based staff here. We're made up of the members. So the provincial canola growers are who are members. What's a little bit unique about our organization is that we're not membership funded. Our farmers don't actually contribute directly financially to our organization because we're also a financial institution. I'll get into that a little bit later. So we are kind of unique where we have a pure farmer focus, but we actually don't take checkoff dollars from farmers, which is typically how farm organizations are run, which is when a farmer goes to deliver their grain or their product to an elevator or processor, a certain amount of dollars per ton is then returned to a provincial group, and then that goes up to a national group. So we're a little bit different in that regard just because of our financial structure. So who are we? We represent Canada's 43,000 canola farmers. Canola is grown coast to coast, predominantly, of course, the prairies, where most of it's grown. About half of all the canola in Canada is grown in Saskatchewan. About 10 million acres a year is planted in Saskatchewan. To put it in context, on an annual basis, about 100 million acres of field crops planted in Canada from coast to coast to coast. About 20 million acre of those is canola. So 1 in 5 acres of field crops is canola on an annual basis. And our job really, it's there, but our job really is to represent our farmers on any issues that impact on farm profitability. That's really kind of our guiding principle. The more farmers are successful, the better job we're doing. We're also the largest administrator for what's called the Advanced Payments Program, which is basically founded by CCGA for us in 1984, because canola was a new crop and wasn't accessible for a cash advance from the federal government. Since then, we moved into the space and actually become a large player, which I'll describe a little bit. But again, this is a snapshot. This is our 10-member farmer board from, we draw members from Ontario, Ontario to British Columbia. There's some canola grown in Quebec, but not enough where they do not have a provincial organization. Saskatchewan, Alberta, Manitoba make up the middle of that. So these 10 board members, they set our policy priorities. They are our sounding board. They know what works best for their farms, and the geography of them allows us to sort of, I think, have a pretty good sense, make sure our policies work for farmers regardless of where they do farm in the country. So the other part that's interesting about us, as I mentioned, so we're the largest administrator of the Advanced Payments Program. It's not really a loan program. Farming is very cash intensive. Farmers have money, but a lot of it is tied up in the land. Farmers reinvest in their land, much like any business owner, but they're not necessarily liquid at certain times of the year. So cash advance is a federally run program. There's about 30 odd administrators, but we're by far the largest, doing over 60% of that program. It allows farmers, so we call it cash cropping. You often hear in agriculture. That means that our farmers don't get paid until they deliver. They harvest their grain, they harvest their products. They don't get paid until they deliver to whoever their collection point is, whether that's a grain elevator or a processor. They can have all the grain in the world in their bins, but they don't get paid until they deliver it. Agriculture commodities are traded on the futures market, which means that sometimes commodity prices are low, sometimes commodity prices are high. So our program, in a lot of ways, is a marketing program that allows farmers to decide when they want to sell their products, and they can still have access to cash in the meantime. We offer no application fee and 75 below prime. We're just finishing up our fiscal year. We'll be close to, for my organization, $2.3 billion lent in our fiscal year. So a pretty significant dollar amount going out to about 10,000 farmers on an annual basis. And the squeeze we make on that is essentially how CCGA runs our operation, our policy, our communications, our cash advance team. We have about 90 full-time staff, making us the largest probably national agriculture organization in Canada in terms of staff contingency. So here's just a little bit about the economic impact. I won't read it verbatim, but the canola sector indirectly and directly provides for over 200,000 jobs, almost $30 billion annually to the Canadian economy. No agriculture commodity for the last 10 years or so has ever earned farmers more farm cash receipts. That's just based on how much do farmers get paid across all the commodities. So canola farmers earned $13.7 billion by growing canola in 2022. We exported $14.4 billion in 2022 worth of canola products. That's canola seed, canola oil, canola meal. The oil can be used for biofuels or for cooking, or PepsiCo cooks all their products, chips and all that, restaurants. And the meal is a very good feedstock for animals. So it goes to dairy production, it goes to cattle, it goes all over the world. So we export to about 50 countries around the world, and 90% of the canola grown in Canada is exported every year. So we only use 10% domestically. We export 90% of what we grow. So trade policy is key for us. I won't get too much into the production, but what's interesting is that we are looking at, we've had massive investments in the canola sector in 2022. Right now, we have the capacity to say value add process about half of the canola we grow on an annual basis. Been over $2 billion worth of new canola crush plant announcements in 2022. And with Imperial Oil coming online with the renewable diesel plant based in Edmonton with $720 million investment, we could get up to about 15 million tons a year being processed here in Canada. And I'll get in a little bit more on that kind of that interplay between us and the oil and gas sector in a moment. This is just our team, our advocacy team, which is policy, government relations, and communications. There's 12 or 13 of us that really spend our time thinking about, how do we move the needle for farmers from a policy perspective? What are the irritants? What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? There's 3 of us based here in Ottawa that full time on our focus is predominantly Parliament Hill. We don't do provincial advocacy because we have provincial groups based in Edmonton, based in Saskatchewan, etc. They're really best positioned to talk to their legislatures. The 3 staff we have here, myself, Julia, and Gail, are all former political staff, so we've got a pretty good sense of sort of what works and what doesn't work in meetings, having sat on the other side of the table in the past. So it's like big issues impacting farmers. So this is kind of, I use this sort of image a lot, the sort of federal policy marketplace. And I'd say this image looks convoluted, it looks complicated. I would suggest this would be like a well-running majority government, not a minority government. And this is sort of pre-social media, pre-Twitter, pre-anything like that. But it shows the number of sort of competing factors that do go in to policymaking that ultimately impacts either your viewers, your constituents, or mine. These are the sort of different forces at play, and this is what we get paid as lobbyists to try to navigate and try to often looking for wins. Sometimes the absence of a loss is a win. A lot of risk management, but a lot of also trying to seize on opportunities when they do present themselves. So these are the 7 key policy areas that we work in. Trade, marketing, transportation, biofuels, environment, sustainability, inputs. That's sort of anything a farmer is buying to go into their operation. Sort of that, whether it's that would include everything from the seed, crop protection products. Fertilizer has been a huge issue and a lot of headlines of late. Any of those sort of things that go into actually growing a crop. And then business risk management. Agriculture is inherently risky business, whether it's China blocking canola market access, whether it's weather, whether it's rail, whether it's delays in rail blockades, outages of railroads. So business risk management is a huge area that we focus on. There are some federal government programs like agri-stability, because farmers often are at the whim of weather and changing climate, et cetera. So it's an inherently risky business. Again, this is sort of similar to the last one, but maybe a little bit less formal. These are the sort of the big things at play right now. Working capital and competitiveness is huge. Agriculture is an intensive business when it comes to the financial capital required. And I think we have seen a lack of focus federally on competition, being more competitive, being more innovative, doubling down on what we do well, looking at intensification. So that's a key area for us and covers a lot of different areas. Environment sustainability. I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be a negative. There certainly are concerns with a lot of the policies we're dealing with. But when we look at environment sustainability, and I think I have it on the next slide, agriculture production has doubled over the last, say, 40 years in Canada, and our emissions have remained static. So you can look at, yes, we're not necessarily reducing emissions, but that's on an absolute basis. If you look on an intensity basis, we've gotten far better. We're producing far more efficiently. And of course, we can always improve, but we are trying to make the case that we should look at what we're doing. We're producing more using the same amount. And I think that is something that most other industries, would be hard pressed to say. Innovation or lack thereof, again, just a lack of focus on reducing red tape, on making sure farmers have access to the products they need. Farmers use cutting edge technology. A combine that a farmer would plant their crop in can be upwards of $1 million. They want products of biotechnology. They want products of gene editing. They want the latest chemistries. They want the best fertilizer products. They want open markets. Those are some of the sort of core tenets of canola farmers. On the biofuel file, canola blends into diesel, transportation diesel, as a cleaner alternative. It's something we work very closely with the oil and gas sector, the fuel sector. I think they view it as the horse is sort of out of the barn on the biofuel side of things. And if you look at sustainable aviation fuel, et cetera. So we work closely on the clean fuel regulations, making sure they can actually work and they don't put too much of a burden on farmers. Transportation's huge. 90% of the canola grown is exported. 7 out of 10 tons go through the Port of Vancouver, and the Port of Vancouver has capacity issues. We have issues with rail. We only have 2 Class A railways. There's not a lot of competition in the rail sector in Canada, and our members rely on it. What happens if rail is late, the grain elevator gets full, farmers can't deliver, they don't get paid. They still have bills that are coming due. So particularly October, November, December are big movement months. Trade, I kind of already touched on. Business risk management. We're in a minority government, so private members' bills, good and bad. There are some good ones there. There's one bad one for canola, but private members' bills are a tool that we have available to us because, for good or bad, because we have a minority government. So these are some of the big, and those bills in particular. 234 is a carbon exemption bill that just passed third reading yesterday. I'll talk about. 244 is around right to repair. Benefits everyone, but I think Canadians should be able to, have their appliances, cell phones, farming equipment repaired by whomever they want. 294 is similar to that, or interoperability, and 282 is a trade bill, which we're not supportive of, as it limits the scope of future negotiations. So again, we're not opposed to environment sustainability. These are some of the things that we're striving to do. Essentially, what we're trying to do is we're trying to produce more canola on the same amount of land, so about 20 million acres. And farmers want to use less inputs. Absolutely, inputs are their highest, the most expensive line items. But we're trying to do it in a way that ensures economic sustainability and environmental sustainability are 2 sides of the same coin on farm. If farmers have money, they reinvest in their operations, and it seems of late too much focus on the environment sustainability without focusing on the economics. And it's cliche now, at least in Ottawa, but you can't be green if you're in the red. Like, you have to have the money to be able to invest. We all want to do better. And farmers I would say, are far better stewards of land than environmental groups, because these folks are 4th, 5th generation farmers that are looking at passing their farms onto their kids and their grandkids. They know what a healthy environment looks like. So the state of play in Ottawa, 8 years of the Liberal government, half that time in minority governments. Governments are often their own worst enemies, right? We did see in the fall of 2022, discussions began to shift towards more of a focus away from just climate change to also include monetary policy and geopolitics, which is a good thing, I'd suggest. We have a supply and confidence agreement between the federal Liberals and the New Democrats. We certainly saw evidence of that strong agreement come out in the budget that was tabled on Tuesday by our Deputy Prime Minister and our Finance Minister. And then, of course, in Ottawa, in a minority government, there's always this sort of, the punditry around a pending election. I don't see an election happening in 2023. Just have to look at fundraising. The Conservatives would love to go. The NDP didn't have a great fundraising in 2022. And that supply and confidence agreement, I don't think it's going to last till 2025, but I think we'll go to the polls in 2024. I think the bigger risk would be the Prime Minister deciding to hit the reset button and prorogue Parliament perhaps this fall. That's kind of a chance to reset. I think that's the biggest threat that I see as I look at some of the positive legislation that we're working towards. But again, the election is a perennial thing, and people make a living in Ottawa speculating on that. I don't see it in the cards for 2023. It probably cost $800 million, and we'd have a minority government with maybe Poilievre instead of Trudeau. I think the next time we go to the polls, I think it should be for a majority government, one way or the other. So part of what we do is we bring canola farmers to the Hill too. It's really important that the farmers tell their story just like any other sector. And in the fall of 2022, we had our farmers come to the Hill, and they're certainly happy to after a couple of years of lockdowns and not being able to get here in person. They're certainly pleased to see that they're able to return and do the good work they do. Storytelling is so powerful, right? For whoever you are. I'm there from a policy perspective day in and day out. But farmers coming and telling their stories, how these policies impact their farms for better or for worse. It's a really hard thing to argue or push back on. It's their experience. They're, being with our vice chair on the Hill in November, his 35 years, he's seen increased productivity, increased biodiversity, more birds of prey, better things on his farm as he's got better technology. And I think it's something that it's very powerful to bring that voice. People directly implicated by these policies, not someone that lives in the suburbs of Ottawa, but also bringing farmers from across Canada to town. So yeah, I guess I just want to put a bit of this in context, right? So who is engaging the federal government currently? Lobbying has exploded since the start of the pandemic. Some sectors weren't represented. They, perhaps were shut down, like restaurants and hotels. And then, so they came to town as obviously Treasury Board was flooding money out to try to support the economy, try to support industries. But what has happened is we've had a ballooning of the number of registered lobbyists and number of organizations. So over 3,000, almost 3,400 different groups on the Hill at any given time talking to federal politicians. This is just federal advocacy. Over 8,000 registered federal lobbyists. We should probably be at 4,500 is probably where the market should really bear. Over 8,000 people bringing their message across. So sometimes you'll see from governments or individual parliamentarians, doesn't seem like there's a lack of cohesive strategy. Well, there's 8,000 different people telling them different things, different ways they should spend money, different policy priorities, different areas to focus on. So at a certain point, part of this is because of during the pandemic, we're doing things by Zoom and Teams. It's great for events like this. It's great for, education, information sharing. But it used to have to be, if you wanted to come to Ottawa or you wanted to talk to a member of parliament that wasn't your local MP, come to Ottawa and discuss it with me. And now MPs are sort of stuck between in-person Zoom Teams meetings. Not necessarily a bad thing, perhaps good for democracy, but it also has flooded the space with all these ideas, and many of them are disparate, and many of them I suggest are not necessarily well thought out. Organizations like mine, the legitimacy we bring is we have a governance structure. We have a 10-member farmer board who deliberate in the policy perspectives. I can't just go say whatever I want. There's repercussions for that. We have provincial groups that feed into that structure so that anything we say is accurate, balanced, true. We can back it up. It's verifiable, footnote, however you want to look at it. And that's a fundamentally important to lobbying's role in democracy. So in 2022, we were pretty good at that. We were, us, the canola industry, my organization in particular, we were the #1 lobbying organization in Canada in 2022 in terms of engagements with members of parliament. We have to register those things with MPs. Anyone who's considered a designated public office holder, we need to disclose that with the Commissioner for Lobbying every time we meet with them by subject matter and date of meeting. All that gets sort of rolled up, and then annually they outline who the top groups are. So this is the overview of the top organizations in Canada in terms of the number of meetings they did with members of parliament, ministers, senators, within the departments, assistant deputy ministers and up are covered by that. So in 2022, we had 240 meetings registered with the commissioner, about 20 a month, pretty aggressive pace. There were over 21,000 meetings registered, 31,000 meetings registered in 2022. We were the top at 240. So how slim that sliver is, it's not even a percentile point of that at total meetings, shows why it's so important that if you have issues that the federal government has direct responsibility over, or your constituents or your members, however you characterize it, your clients have it can be directly, either positively or negatively impacted by federal government decisions. We're hearing from 31,000 separate voices, essentially. We were the top, we did 240 of that. So it speaks to why we're there day in and day out doing what we do to make sure that we have, bring our point across. Ottawa is an echo chamber. If you're not there advocating for your sector, whatever that sector is, someone else is doing it for you. I can guarantee it. All you have to do is check out the lobbyist registry and see what maybe groups who are opposed to your point of view, who they're meeting with, because they're active. I certainly assure you that some of them fall on this list that I would say have a very different view of agriculture, have a very different view of farming than we do. They're not farm groups, but they have a very different view and take stances and positions that would be opposed to ours at times. And there's also many of our partners there. I see the University of Alberta is there too. So the education system's certainly up there, their lobbying game over the last number of years. I was pleased that as a result of that, as just said at the beginning, that I was again selected as one of the top 100 lobbyists. Again, it's something that we try to do. When I spoke to over 8,000 of us now here in Ottawa, it's really important that if your sector is looking to engage, that you get good people to do it on your behalf, people that build genuine relationships, that are there day in and day out. We have an excellent policy team. Our policy team are subject matter experts in 2 files, and that's it. And they get academic level expertise that they can then give to me, and then me and my team can then go try to sell those policy positions here in Ottawa. Again, getting close to the end here, because I do want time for questions, because I think there's a lot to go on. I think these are just some of the areas, and I highlighted partnerships because I know in just our pre-conversations, you're always interested in a few things. working with the natural resource sector. So I'd say that these are just sort of some of the key tenets to advocating well on behalf of yourself or your sector. One is persistence. You have to be there day in and day out telling your story, or someone else will tell it for you. They just will. Second is policy prioritization. I gave you the list of our issues impacting farmers. A typical advocacy meeting is 30 minutes from the time you walk in that office, the time you get that photo for social and you get out. You have maybe 3 topics you can cover in that time. And you also have to have dialogue. So going into the laundry list of demands does not work. Stick to 2 or 3 important topics and do not go in with challenges for which you do not have a proposed solution. I see that happen time and time again, where people go in for, it's like they're venting to their friends, but it's a federal elected official or an appointed official. Go in with solutions. We don't present any issues, challenges for which we don't have a solution, and we try to characterize all of our policy positions as opportunities if the government acts upon them. Partnerships. It's a huge one. You can't go it alone. If you have an idea that's so good that you're trying to convince the federal government of it, other people should likely share that view. If it's such a good idea, why don't others agree? And they also want to know who doesn't agree with us, who doesn't agree with our position. So we spend a lot of time trying to present a unified front. We do try to do that because it's really important that we can go in and have done our homework and said, yeah, it's not just our organization. We have every other farm organization or agriculture organization behind us. Partnerships really important too, of getting outside the traditional ones, right? Like we're members of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and a number of other organizations, because I think sectors often get pigeonholed, right? Where agriculture, go talk to Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Maybe if you're oil and gas, go talk to NRCan, Natural Resources Canada. The powers that be, Prime Minister's office, Deputy Prime Minister's office, Treasury Board, Justice, Finance, those have significant influence. And if you're not engaging with them on your sector's behalf, you're kind of missing your opportunity. I should have explained that kind of image there on the screen is, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Absolutely, people make decisions on your behalf. It's much easier to start to get in a position where you're saying no to things, as opposed to events are happening and you're scrambling to try to get there. Definitely was on display this week in Ottawa. Federal budget presented on Tuesday. 300 odd of us got invited to a budget lockup, where we go to a federal building, they take our cell phones and we get 4 hours of the budget before it's released. I can't tell you the number of people scrambling to try to get a seat at that proverbial table. And it was sort of oversubscribed to. So it's much easier to say no to things. Political realities, there are sometimes it's just not worth railing against. There are certain things with this federal government, such as a carbon exemption bill. There's no point trying to convince cabinet of that, but there's other opportunities. So just identifying those political realities and being able to just understand that there are times there's no point in arguing with the ocean about the tides. It's a foregone conclusion. Perception is reality. People have a different perception of things than you do. It's a really hard thing perhaps to come to some sort of a understanding with yourself with, but people view the world very differently than you do, and perception is reality. So it's really important to always think of where you're from in the world, whether it's geography. I could say, just based on the panelists here, that Quebec has a very different view of agriculture than Alberta does, and that comes out in policy priorities. So, but not understanding that is a lost opportunity for those in my space. Public opinion, all politics is local. Reagan coined that in the 70s. It's never been more true. The more we can line up our issues with what Canadians generally think, the better. We work on an annual basis with polling firms to understand what Canadians think of our issues, so make sure that wherever possible, we can line up with it. Members of Parliament, or before they become ministers or before they're sent here, have to first be elected. And the more we can connect our values to the values of their constituents, the better chance we have of that resonating. Lastly, just polite. Just disagree without being disagreeable. Focus on bad policy, not bad people. I say this all the time to my team, to anyone that will listen. I will speak to a member of Parliament who I'm vehemently opposed to their policy position on something, the same way I'd expect to be spoken to if someone ran into me at a grocery store with my kids, out for dinner with my wife. That's the way you speak to people, because they're not bad people. You have a difference of opinion. So you focus on the bad policy, you disagree without being disagreeable. You have no idea how many doors will open when you just be a decent person about how you interact with people. This notion of yelling and railing and getting angry on Twitter, that we have to, there is an imbalance of power here. The federal minister of agriculture could just never meet with me again. We have a difference of opinion on some issues. I met with her on Monday. disagree without being disagreeable. Amazing how many doors will open. Lastly, I just wanted to shout out this because it's a huge tie into the natural resource community. This is a bill 234, that is a result of partnerships, is a result of working directly with 15 national farm organizations. Not all those farm organizations get along typically when you look at supply management and export oriented sectors. We engaged heavily with all the sort of relevant oil and gas and propane and gas associations. This bill, again, which would never be possible with that political reality of cabinet, but we're in a minority government. This is a private members bill. We talked to Mr. Ben Lobb. He agreed to introduce it. We've been, as the Agriculture Carbon Alliance, it's sort of cheerleader and it's supporter and it's policy think tank and advocate from the very beginning. Then yesterday, 176 members of parliament voted in favor of Canada's farmers, growers, and ranchers to say the natural gas and propane used on farm to dry your grain, heat and cool your livestock barn and greenhouses, irrigate your land, and prepare feed for your feedstock should be exempt from carbon pricing. Farmers currently have gasoline and diesel are exempted on farm. If this bill, which will now be referred to the Senate, passes, farmers won't be paying carbon tax on food production, which will help with a lot of issues we're seeing right now for Canadians. Help farmers' bottom line. There's no viable alternatives for farmers to use anything except natural gas and propane. Why are they being penalized for it? And I can say that is a policy perspective, not from a philosophical standpoint, but just from a bad policy that resonated. And those 176 MPs that voted in favor yesterday include the Conservative Party of Canada, the NDP, the Green Party, and the Bloc Québécois, as well as 3 Liberals. So when it does speak, it's again, good policies are good policies. You support good policy regardless of where it comes from, and you push back on bad policy regardless of where it comes from. And all those parties, the NDP, Green Bloc, and Conservatives, don't necessarily agree on a lot of things, but they did agree on the principles I just outlined here. So it does show the importance of partnerships, the importance of coming together, the importance of it's so easy to focus on what divides you or what you don't agree on. And I think if you were able to compartmentalize that a little bit and you recognize that probably 90% of things most people actually agree on, but we focus on that 5 or 10%, just a bad mindset. If you can reverse that and build that relationship based on a 90% agreeability rate, and then when you have that relationship, then you can work through the harder stuff. And that's really a great example of the leadership that we saw from the NDP Bloc and Conservative critics. The chair of the Liberal chair of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture broke party ranks and voted in favor of this bill. He's from Cody Boyce from Kings Hants, Nova Scotia. So again, it shows good policy can come to the forefront. I'll maybe wrap it up there, Justice. I probably went a few minutes longer. Again, I could go long at length. I'm very passionate about this line of business, farm and advocating for farmers. People have questions. There's my email and my Twitter, quite active, as well as our Ottawa sort of general office. Maybe I'll just say, in closing that how to get involved, in the sector. I'd say get informed is the number one thing. I think being informed of sort of federal political politics is difficult to do given the kind of polarization we have in media. There's a great website called nationalnewswatch.com, which is a news aggregator. It's not an outlet. It just aggregates federal political stories that are trending and brings it all to one place. So you can get stuff from Toronto Star or the Sun. You can get Globe and Mail and National Post. Whatever is trending is what brings it there. Get informed. For young people, I say this to every farmer I talk to, every local business owner, on an annual basis, meet with your federal member of parliament and your member of provincial parliament or MLA or MNA, wherever you are in the country, for 30 minutes. Once a year, meet with both of them. Particularly if you're in the business sector, you're in the farming sector, natural resources sector, it's so much easier to build a relationship when there's not a crisis, when you're not going through a crisis. It's so much easier to go in, make some introductions. 6 months down the road, an issue happens, you call up your local MP's office, you sit down for a meeting with them. It really is all it takes. I'll give one quick example. Farmers, small businesses, and fisheries, succession planning wise, it's more expensive to sell your farm business to your kids than it is to a stranger. That's the way our tax system works. Manitoba, Brandon, Manitoba MP Larry McGuire kept hearing this from constituents. I guess he brought up at Manitoba caucus, got a lot of nodding heads, brought up a national caucus, got a lot of nodding heads, introduced a private members bill to change the tax implications for farmers, fisheries, and small businesses. That's now law. That received royal assent last year. Because of constituents raising issues with him, we now have a private members bill that received royal assent that will benefit small businesses like my father-in-law or my farmers that I represent. They can sell their kids, their farm businesses for the same cost structure as to strangers. And I think just a misconception that I'd say just around agriculture here a lot is that, or we see, is that innovation is good everywhere except for agriculture. We want the latest cell phones, we want the latest technology. But when it comes to agriculture, there's a sort of notion that the way grandparents or the few generations ago farmed with American Gothic painting, that was sustainable. And it's just not the case. Modern technology, biotechnology, gene editing, crop protection products, fertilizer have made us more sustainable, both economically and environmentally. I'll pause there and stop sharing my screen. Thanks for the opportunity, and I hope everyone got a little something out of it.